I'm Dick Gordon. This is The Story. Maybe you've met one of these people who's completely obsessed with pizza. I'm not talking about Domino's or anything that comes in a cardboard box. I'm talking about the kind of artisanal Neapolitan pizza where you're not even thinking about toppings. It's the crunch of the crust, the sweet hint of good olive oil, fresh herbs, maybe tomatoes, maybe cheese. Most serious pizza people likely already know the name Anthony Mangieri. He's the man behind Una Pizza Napoletana. It was first based in Manhattan's East Village, where people lined up for his pizzas. Anthony has since moved the business to San Francisco, but it's pretty much the same. No appetizers or breadsticks, no salad, desserts, just 5 pizzas. All pretty similar. $20 for a 12-inch pie. No slices, no substitutions. If you look in the kitchen, you'll see him there. Anthony makes every pizza himself. He's been doing it since the time when he could have been playing baseball with other kids in New Jersey.
I lived with my grandmother, who lived across the street from my mom and dad, and she had a lot of old cookbooks and stuff and things in Italian that I couldn't really read, but I would try to figure out. And I can remember I would get up and bake bread because of my timings with trying to make the bread raise and be ready. I would get up like in the middle of the night and work, and I would make such a mess out of her kitchen, and she would get really upset with me. And all I had was a little pizza stone in there, and I would make loaf after loaf of bread in there, pizza, and I mean, it was ridiculous. And I started to give it to some neighbors and stuff, and that was really where I started to get going with that.
Wait a second, I missed one of the most important parts of Anthony's story. When he was growing up, his family would travel to Italy, to Naples. Anthony didn't study cooking there. He was too young, but he was watching and tasting.
And it was also, I feel like, a different time of the world where people weren't so open with information. It was much more, I feel like, kept within, the secrets of a bakery or a pizzeria or with anything, actually, back then.
So would you be like looking in back windows at these brick ovens?
Yes, definitely I would be. I would definitely be doing that. Or if I found a place that I like, especially regarding pizza, I would drag my mom there and we would eat there for like lunch and dinner, and then go back the next day and the next day. And the beautiful thing is that I can still remember all these years ago that even then the nuances of something that was handmade fluctuating from, say, lunch to dinner and then the next day in the same place. The things were beautiful and they were still quality, but I could, even at that age and still to this day, remember the nuances and differences of day-to-day things when it's an artisan product. And that was something else that really turned me on and got me into it.
And I would bet at that time that there wasn't really anything like that in New Jersey, right?
Oh, no, definitely not. The only place that was doing anything that I was really inspired by back in America, actually, in general at the time, was a place in Coney Island called Totono's and John's Pizzeria in New York City on Bleecker, and then a little bit later on, Grimaldi's under the Brooklyn Bridge.
I mean, the fact that you can just list 3 is a pretty good indication that the kind of pizza that we were getting from the pizzeria on the corner of the town that we grew up in wasn't quite what you were chasing at the time, I guess.
No. But I'll say, even as a kid in New Jersey, the pizza wasn't like it became later on. It's funny, it went through a kind of an arc. It was pretty decent when I was really young, I think, because there weren't the large companies that supplied, all the ingredients and the dough already made and the sauce already made. So every Italian-American pizzeria still had a little bit of its own character. And then after that, it started to become more of a generic product that became sort of manufactured in factories, and all these pizzerias could open and buy everything pre-made.
So how old were you, Anthony, when you started making pizzas and really started concentrating on what you were doing?
I mean, really started concentrating probably like around 14 or 15 years old is when I really started to get like obsessed with it. But I was also obsessed with a few other things, such as skateboarding and bicycling and punk rock music. So it was an odd combination.
Where were you cooking? Was there a brick oven in the house?
No, there wasn't at the time, but excuse me, but I ended up convincing my father that we could build one in the backyard, which didn't work so well, but we did do that. We had no plans or anything and had no clue what we were doing, but we went to the hardware store and bought some fire brick and some terracotta and some cinder blocks, and we made this thing that ended up being enormous. But the baking area inside was probably like a 2-foot square, and it didn't work. It was totally square inside. It just made smoke all over the backyard, and it looked nice, but I barely used it. But before I did that, I started trying to actually cook them on the floor of my mom's fireplace in the house, because she had a fireplace that didn't have one of those raised gates in the front of it. So the floor of the fireplace was actually flush with the fieldstone decorative piece in front of it that went right out onto the flooring of the living room. So I would have my dad fire that thing up for me, and then I would try to put pizzas on the floor right in front of the fireplace, and it didn't work well, but I remember that it did something different than what I could get in the home oven, and I was like, that's the secret. I need a real oven. And then that's when I started to try to get my dad to make the one in the backyard.
And were you selling pizzas at the time, or was it just for the family?
No. I was just making them like a maniac for myself and my mom, and just throwing them out and experimenting continuously. And it just grew into like probably too much of an obsession at a certain point that probably didn't allow me to develop in other ways as a teenager should, but.
But you had a place at some point fairly early on the Jersey Shore, right? Some beach pizzeria?
Yes. I opened up a bakery in Red Bank, New Jersey, probably when I was about 20 or so, and I'm 41 now. So, and that was, I wanted to open up a pizzeria even then, but I couldn't afford it because of the idea of having chairs and tables and a public restroom and everything. That we were on a real shoestring budget, my mom and dad and I. So we got an oven, and I had it shipped to us. It was from Europe. It wasn't Italian though, and it didn't work that great, but it was still beyond anything that I could ever dream of at the time.
Still a fairly significant investment for someone who's just starting out.
Yeah, and that was all we had really equipment-wise, and my dad was able to get a bunch of like used sinks for the kitchen area, and that was it. I didn't even have a mixing machine. I actually mixed all the dough by hand, and I worked there by myself, and that was it. I used to go in and bake bread from 10 o'clock at night until probably about 2 in the afternoon. And sometimes my grandmother, she would come and hang out in there with me at night and stuff, or my sister or whoever. And that was sort of really the first business. And then from that, after maybe 2.5 or 3 years of doing that, it was really, really before its time for the area that I was at. And I was really not making anything, and sort of felt like maybe it wasn't going to work out for me. And, and my dad worked in Atlantic City, so I sort of had thought maybe I should just go get a regular job down in Atlantic City doing whatever, maybe like being a janitor or something. I didn't care. I just thought it would be cool to do something where I didn't have to use my mind and everything continuously, and could kind of free myself up from this obsession.
But what was it like for you on the beach, though, doing this kind of artisan cooking? I guess you're next to ice cream parlors and crab shacks and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Well, when we closed the bakery, I did open a pizzeria then at the beach, and that was really that was a tough struggle in the beginning. We were across the street from the public beach, and we had a parking lot with a 7-Eleven in it and a hair salon and a sports bar, and then me in there making what I consider to be like ancient Neapolitan pizza from like 2,000 years ago with no mixing machine. And I actually opened up serving only 2 kinds of pizzas, tomato and cheese. I didn't slice it, which at the time, you can imagine, like I had like these, tough, muscular, tank top wearing Staten Islanders coming down, in the summer. and walking in and wanted a slice, and I would be like, no, this is the way I make it. And it was pretty stressful. I mean, I think I actually got into a few fistfights in that pizzeria over pizza, which now I realize probably wasn't such a smart move, but at the time I thought it was worth fighting for.
Well, it's also kind of a weird place to have a restaurant, right? Because you've got people probably coming in barefoot, tracking sand into the place.
Yes, exactly. We did have that happen quite a bit, and as we were across the street from the public beach, and the other place was more of a restaurant, the sports bar, people would just assume that they could, come in and shoot across the little dining room and head into the bathroom, and I would get pretty upset about it. And stuff, or they would go in there and try to change and stuff. So I did everything myself. So I took every little thing personal. So it wasn't like I had a janitor or, someone that worked for me that would go in there. So everything was on me. So I would make all this pizza and also then have to go clean the bathroom at the end of the night. And I would get really upset. So one day I just could not take it anymore. And I had this idea to take a piece of firewood, and I ran around the backside of this doorway, and I actually took the wood and screwed it into the floor behind the door so that the door couldn't be opened. So then I would stand at the counter for the remainder of the day, and people would come in and, just ignore me standing there and just go straight across the dining room for that back door, assuming that's where the bathroom was. And they would get to the door and they would shake it, and then I would watch them come walking up to me sort of like, trying to be a little nice and, oh, do you have a public restroom? And I'd say, no, we don't have one. And then they would walk out, and I had such satisfaction from that.
Eventually, Anthony Mangieri made his way to New York, to the East Village, and Una Pizza Napoletana was born. We'll talk about those pizzas in just a moment. I'm Dick Gordon from APM, American Public Media. This is The Story. I'm Dick Gordon. This is The Story. Growing up in New Jersey, Anthony Mangieri's Italian family indulged his obsession with making traditional Neapolitan pizzas. These days, he's making some of the best pizza in the country. His first shop on the Jersey Shore was getting a lot of attention. Food writers were coming to try his pizza, and then coming back again and bringing friends. And eventually Anthony knew that this good press meant he was ready to take his artisanal pizza out of New Jersey and into New York City.
I always believed that the pizza was better than anybody else's, even when I was in New Jersey. So, I used to go to New York a lot and eat and stuff and hang out up there. And I'd always think, man, this place that I have is so much better. I'm, egotistically, I was like, I'm going to come up here now and I'm going to show the world what I'm doing and that this is the best. And, I just survived and lived at home and, always building it slowly and slowly and slowly. So it's really a long, long progression of, from 14 years old to 41 to basically make the same product every day of my life or every day that I do work.
So talk to me a little bit about the ingredients. What goes into these pizzas that makes them so unusual?
Well, the dough, I think, is the main thing. The dough is naturally leavened, so the dough doesn't have any yeast in it whatsoever. It's what you would call a sourdough, and that's really the key, and usually what most people will recognize or make note of. And then also just the touch, the touch of ingredients. They're always lightly topped so that the dough is always the focus of everything, and the ingredients are, continually to this day, I am always changing ingredients and trying to find the best. And, most of the ingredients are imported from Italy. And some of them I get through people that I've been buying through for many, many years. And other ones I, search for something new or something that's better, or a company in Italy that's really trying to push the envelope on quality or organic.
But we're not talking about meat, right? We're just talking about tomatoes and cheese and olive oil, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the amazing thing is, I guess because I'm a simple person at heart, but Yeah, just a few ingredients, and it seems so complicated to my small world.
I heard, or I guess I was reading a description that you had at one point of something about if you adjust the toppings just a tiny bit, then you make a huge difference in the taste of the pizza. Explain that to me if you can.
Sure. Yeah, I guess originally I started to feel that way because of in the old days in Naples, they would serve things, and it was funny to me that they would have like a dish and then they would give it a different name if it just had like black pepper in it, or if it just had one little thing extra. And I would think, gosh, how can it be a totally different dish if they just add black pepper? But it's true. It really does. If all the ingredients in any dish are of the highest quality and your touch in assembling them is delicate and balanced, I really do feel that like one extra little ingredient or a heaviness on one particular ingredient does totally change the composition of the flavors and will, unbalance things or could make things great, but in a different way. So
a friend of mine who used to go regularly to your pizzeria in New York said that you do everything yourself. You mix the dough, you prepare the toppings, you tend the fire in the brick oven. There's no one else. It's almost like you don't want to let anyone else in on that process. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Unfortunately, I keep trying to find a way to get out of this way a little bit. But I don't know. I just, I'm a believer that there's something beautiful to go to a place or to purchase a product or to, have a service from someone and it's from that person. It would be like I always felt like if you bought a ticket to go see your favorite musician play and then you got to the concert and the musician isn't the one singing and they have someone else standing in for them singing. And for some reason in the food world, that's never been sort of the way that people look at it. They use their name, but then they just, train a bunch of people how to do the basics and they're never there. And I don't know, it just seems like it's not really the way to pass on the true love of what you're doing and the beauty of it. So, yes, as of now, I still do all that myself.
But if you're having a busy night, Anthony, and you run out of dough, what do you do?
We close it up. Yeah, because the dough is made the day before, so it takes that much time for it to raise naturally and unrefrigerated.
So I could come in at 11 o'clock at night going, I have been waiting for this pizza all day long.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Oh, the dough's gone. We're closed.
Yeah. I make a lot of dough nowadays from when I started. So if we do sell out, it's usually only on a Friday or Saturday.
And you're exhausted anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like if I had any dough left, you wouldn't want that pizza because I'll be making it with my elbows.
Do you ever get bored with this? Because your menu is limited. You work in a very confined space with the oven and these ingredients. So how is Friday different from Thursday? How is one week different from the next? You've been doing this now for over 20 years.
Yeah, I truly do not get bored with it. I do have other interests in my life also, but when I'm in there, it is all consuming to me, and that is all that my mind and my body are focused on, and I just have never gotten bored with it. It's it's a continuous evolution. I feel like I'm so far from getting the pizza where I think it could be, or just my energy or the way that I move or everything. I feel like it's an endless pursuit. And I think that is something that goes back to, the old way of thinking, and in Europe, the old way where that's why things were so great, because people did a job for their life and that was it. Unfortunately, in the modern world, people think that they're an expert after a week of taking classes, and then they, might open a place and then they move on to something else a month later.
Right.
And for me, I just feel like expertise is a lifelong pursuit. So, and it evolves every night. I mean, honestly, the pizza could be fantastic on a Wednesday, and on Thursday it might be off by a lot because of the way the dough rose or the wood isn't working the same in the oven or whatever. So it's actually, for me, I always find it still very interesting and still very stressful.
I mean, you made an analogy earlier in our conversation to music, and listening to you talk about work in that space, it's almost like you're a musician, and the pizza ingredients I mean, this is what you're making music with. I don't know if that works for you, but
yeah, I mean, I just love the idea of things flowing in life, in anything you do, you know, sports-wise or making pizza or anything. I really love like the flow and the rhythm of things, or, you know, and so, yeah, I guess it's similar to playing music, or, you know, I always remember reading as a kid, I was really into jazz music, and I used to read a lot about jazz musicians and their thoughts on their improvising and how they would always feel like within that context of improvising, maybe during an entire night show, there was only a few minutes where they actually really got into that space where it was all just gelling together and flowing beautifully, and, you know, and the rest of the time they were just trying to get through. And maybe to, you know, the rest of our ears, we would never know that, but to them, they know it. And that's, I guess, a similar thing with me.
Making these pizzas in New York, Anthony Mangieri attracted a lot of attention. People who wanted to talk with him about book deals or reality TV. And he'd be good at any of that. You're listening to The Story. But even after Anthony moved Una Pizza Napoletana to San Francisco, he says he resisted those overtures. He says he'd sooner make pizza.
I mean, it's really flattering, and, you know, and all this kind of stuff definitely is somewhat necessary at this point in the world, because I don't think you can make a living doing what we do if there isn't some media acknowledgement of what we do, because there's just too many other places that open and people are going to go there, whether they're at the same level of our place or whatever. It's, you know, it's just the nature of the world. So, you know, I would get really excited or feel really flattered to be able to have those kind of opportunities. But when it would come right down to it, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt like it wasn't me. And I at the same time, have always wanted somewhat of a simple life, and certainly didn't get into this to do any of that stuff. It's always been sort of a blue-collar idea for me, and a manual labor type of work, and that's still sort of how I approach it.
And it's funny listening to you talk, Anthony, because you're such a gentle-spoken guy now, and I've read articles about this kind of wild man in the kitchen with tattoos up to his elbows and punk rock blaring, and it's just like, oh, well, was that an Anthony from another time, or is that just another aspect to your character?
No, that's still here.
It's just put away for an interview on public radio. Is that right?
No. I mean, I am a very gentle person by nature, and you know, I mean, but I still love punk rock music, and I still listen to things from when I was 14 years old. I still love it and listen to a lot of it regularly. But there's many sides to everyone, I guess. So there's other sides also, and but yeah, I mean, when I'm working, I just try to conserve my energy for that and not get too stressed out by other stuff like I used to do. I think that's the only difference. I used to, maybe in New York, I wasn't prepared for the level of attention coming from a place in New Jersey where, you know, I had those 20 regular customers and that was it. So when I opened in New York, at that point, I still had never even had anyone really work for me. So it was a learning experience in so many ways, and so intense and so fast and so exposed to the world. And it was so beautiful, but also so consuming. And, you know, and I was, you know, I felt very, very egotistical about what I was doing, and I had to in a way, or I think I would have gotten swallowed up. But I also wasn't afraid to tell people what I thought about myself or the product or other people's stuff. And maybe now I'm not so opinionated, or maybe I still am, and I just tell my wife and that's it.
And you're in San Francisco. You made your way to the West Coast, which is something you had planned some time back. Are you happy where you are now?
Yes. It's a totally different pace than New York City in every way.
Did you take your brick oven from New York to San Francisco?
No. I didn't. I got a new one when I was out here.
These are fairly particular creations, right? Like you've got to have someone who knows exactly how to make one?
Yes. There's only a few people in the world that make them this way. And they're in Naples. The two fellas that make them, their families have been doing this forever. This is all that they've done. And, they did it long before there was a pizza craze. And they'll probably keep doing it. And they're really the same kind of ovens that you would see if you went to Pompeii today and looked at those ovens that were used, over 2,000 years ago.
If you want to try Anthony Mangieri's pizza, you'll have to go to San Francisco and likely wait in line. We have the information on our website. And if you know a story about someone like Anthony, well, we'd like to hear it from you. You can write to us. You can do it on our website at thestory.org. You can write to me at The Story, 120 Friday Center Drive, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. That's 120 Friday Center Drive, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And our zip code is 27517. You can call and leave me a message at 1-888-966-9862 or find me on Facebook or on Twitter at The Story with DG.